Good morning, sir. We will discuss few terms today. First, 3 terms majorly. One is ethnicity, ethnic boundaries, and there is another concept that you have already come across earlier, that is cultural relativism. I would want to have an extended talk on that. I repeat what I was saying. So first I will tell you what we are going to discuss apart from this concept of ethnicity, concept of ethnic boundaries, a continuation of explaining cultural relativism. After this, we will start talking about Malinowski. At least with this particular crowd, I did not speak much about Malinowski except for maybe certain accidents, etc. There's a lot that we'll have to come up with. Many times in your newspapers, in the day-to-day discussions, you must have come across this word called ethnic strife, ethnic struggle, ethnic groups. Generally what happens is when we start hearing a particular word n number of times, we tend to have a familiarity with the term. Whether we actually know the meaning of it or not, irrespective of that, we feel familiar with that. So we will, in one of our earlier classes, I mentioned westernization also. A concept, a term that seems to be familiar, but the meaning in the context of the discipline is different. Sir, in your syllabus there is one very high-sounding concept in paper 2 called nationalism. This is that topic in anthropology that is of late picking up in terms of the papers people are submitting. And especially in Northern America, the concept of nationalism in anthropology has building its strong base. No wonder you see some special branch of anthropology emerging with the title nationalism. Before we introduce you all that in the later classes, I thought it is time we know the meaning of this word. I am not going into the dictionary meanings of them, but then just have a look at it. There is this man called Frederick Barth, B-A-R-T-H. Ethnicity refers to people sharing the basic, most general identity for making social maps. We'll see what it means. Many times we tend to give definitions in a way that we need an interpreter to explain the definition. In fact, the current students appearing with anthropology are lucky because the whole lot of syllabus that was there in the previous anthropology syllabus under ethnicity, which was very cumbersome to handle, one of the toughest things that we had in the syllabus, somehow UPSC was considerate and had removed it. In many of the other optional subjects, the toughness of the syllabus had actually increased, but when it comes to anthropology, they have moderated. That's the secret actually. When people see a whole lot of pages being printed under the syllabus, they think that it's voluminous one. But then bold people like you who pick up the subject irrespective of the size of it, later you will understand that okay, many difficult topics are actually removed. This was one. Those days, Frederick Barth's philosophy was a big-time topic. Somehow, no, because of the old habits, we can't avoid him in our discussions. But then I am trying to limit. I'll catch up with him once again in nationalism. In simple terms, ethnicity is a feeling, a strong feeling of we-ness, not Venus. W-E. It's a very strong feeling of we-ness, so much so that you use all kinds of paraphernalia, some kind of symbols, some kind of mechanisms to show your identity. So I repeat, ethnicity is a strong feeling of we-ness. And that strong feeling binds the people. And in order to bind the people, the members of that group might come with several mechanisms to show their identity to the rest of the people. And you start using those symbols that give you identity, you start respecting, revering them. There is one other related, that's what it is said, people sharing a basic, most general identity for making social maps. They are trying to create a social identity. It need not necessarily be an identity of being belonging to some powerful group. It's not that way. Maybe the weaker ones also will try to show their identity. It is most often an operation of psychology. As it is called, it deals mostly with the cognitive elements of the group. And from time to time they try to strengthen through various symbols. For example, when we try to say that we are Indians, India, nationality is one ethnic group. Though not on a regular basis, but at least twice every year, 26th January and 15th August at least, and once when we have an India-Pakistan match. At least on such occasions, we try to showcase our national identity. That takes me to the other topic called ethnic boundaries. These are all, they are not geographical boundaries, they are psychological. As you were seeing in the earlier class, culture area school, many times it need not necessarily be a geographical boundary. It may be a mental map. So when I talk about ethnic boundary, it is actually any basis that may give an identity to the group there that would bring that unification in them. I repeat, ethnic boundary may be any basis that brings unification in the group and that will give them identity. Ethnicity is a strong we feeling. What brings you we feeling may be a variant. What brings you we feeling is the ethnic boundary. The basis on which you are associating yourself with somebody, that is the ethnic boundary. Meaning that the basis may be a nationality, or it may be belonging to a region, or it may be a religion, it may be a caste, it may be a tribe, or it may be a language group. So what happens is that basis because of which the said group is coming together is subject to variations. I mean, across time and space, based on the basic thing that brings the we feeling that may keep on changing. But what is it that brings that kind of a we-ness? That is called ethnic boundaries. In fact, huge lot of theories were given by this man, Frederick Barth. We will be, when we talk about races in your future classes, we are going to talk about one concept called ethnogenesis. What are the various mechanisms that bring out emergence of this we feeling in them? That's a huge theory, but here cutting everything short, I'm trying to give you certain examples that might bring a strong we feeling in the group. But this we feeling is once again subject to circumstances. It's like, suppose you are in India, you may not be trying to use nationality as a unifying force. Maybe when you are there outside India, you try to look for people belonging to your nationality and then you try to emerge as an ethnic group. But then when you come to India, maybe your region has more importance for you, or your caste, etc. Occasionally gender can also be seen as an ethnic group, but not a really fruitful one. I don't know what you understood. Did you understand the two words? Ethnicity is the we feeling, boundary is the one that brings we feeling, that changes from time to time. It's like students appearing with anthropology can form an ethnic group, because there's so much of solidarity there. So much so that you don't even mind getting into violence means of protecting your own selves, your identity. In the later classes, we are going to see the difference between patriotism and nationalism, and what is it that is in operation. Especially if you have appeared at some defense services exams, you must have thought on those lines, because these are the popular questions there. Are you a nationalist or a patriot? Let me take you to the other one. This was something on which I wanted to spend a little more time. This is one of the concepts that gives a special status, special identity to anthropology, because through cultural relativism, the discipline presents a different way of looking at things. But my discussion here is how far it is useful, or maybe what could be the criticisms or what could be the questions that can be raised against cultural relativism. నన్ను చూడండి మాస్టర్, అమ్మాయిలు వస్తుంటారు, నన్ను చూడండి. Sir, I request the girls to come early to the class. They are highly distractive fellows. सब कुछ भूल कर देखते हो. I repeat, sir. ఎందుకంటే I know that you got drifted from the whole thing. Cultural relativism is one concept that has been giving special status to anthropology, because based on the little discussion that we have had earlier, this concept helps us look at things from a different perspective. Suppose a special question is asked on cultural relativism. True that anthropology glorifies this concept, but that is not the end of it. There are scholars from within and outside anthropology that have questioned the relevance of this concept. To brush up, I will do it once again. I will try to define it once again. By cultural relativism, what anthropology in general and Bowers in particular, because that was the person who had coined the word and given the concept. What they mean by this is, no culture is superior or inferior. Number one, no culture is superior or inferior. One should not judge cultures. Thirdly, if one has to understand culture, understand, respect the diversity there, and try to understand from their perspective. I repeat the three, we'll continue with the four. Cultural relativism as was given by Bowers. One, no culture is superior or inferior. one shall not judge cultures. And thirdly, to understand the other cultures, one need to think from their perspective. Fourthly, a culture group's choices depend on what they believe is right or wrong. A culture group's choices depend on what they believe is right or wrong. Meaning, what is right, what is wrong is specific to that group. Understand very closely. What is right, what is wrong is specific to that group. Meaning, there is nothing like a universal right and universal wrong. There is nothing like a universal right and universal wrong. This is the basic crux of the concept of cultural relativism. The 4 points there. I am trying to take you into a discussion from point number 4. Because this particular topic, this particular point there is nothing like a universal right and universal wrong. What is right and what is wrong is subject to that community, to that culture group. This takes us to the other bigger and major questions. Before I go into that discussion, there are certain terms that one has to know. Actually, sir, okay, we'll look at this. This is how several cultural relativists try to categorize judgments. Any judgment or any stand for that matter, any decision for that matter, can be subjective. Judgments can be subjective. A stand may be subjective. It may be intersubjective. It may be objective judgment. Try to focus at what we are trying to say. We are trying to bring out the criticism or the questions that were raised against the concept of cultural relativism. When in the previous class I said that cultural relativism is a mega concept where you respect the others, your respect for the discipline must have increased multifold. That the subject actually respects the diversity. Cultures have to be understood from their side. You don't try to impose your understanding on them, kind of things. ये कहने में अच्छा लगता है. Two things we will have to see: whether it is desirable, whether it is possible. Desirable and possible. Just compare with marriage. Whether it is desirable to marry more than one. Secondly, whether it is possible to marry more than one. I think there you can understand the meaning of desirability and possibility. एक को अच्छे से रखो. There is no desirability of more than one. Possibility depends on your capability. When I say capability, several things out there. Because girls these days have got their own list of preferences and wants and needs and desires, whatever. उनके हिसाब से उस पे खड़े उतरना बहुत ही मुश्किल है. So you will have to be prepared for all odds in life. Come back here. Several cultural relativists have tried to categorize the way one makes a judgment. Subjective judgments, intersubjective judgments, or objective judgments. Once you understand these three, we will take you to the questions of cultural relativism and the people who are known for challenging this identity. And we will drive all this discussion to one concept called morality. Morality, you understand, right? Morality, are you a moral fellow or not? We'll examine that, how moral we are, and what is the basis of identifying, concluding whether you are moral or not. Because right from your preschool, you had been having this course, moral science, as if morality is a science. Now, when I say subjective judgment, the stands, the decisions taken based on the preferences, the likes, dislikes of the individual. Subjective judgment is arrived at by the individual's preferences. If an individual likes or doesn't like something, prefers certain things or not, based on that, so individual is the master there. Subjective judgments are related to individual's preferences. Where I'm going slow here so that you understand this. The second one, intersubjective judgments, these are arrived at by the preferences, by the values established, or by the code that is given by the culture group to which one belongs. So if at all I have to show diagrammatically, this is subjective, this is intrasubjective, and then this is objective. Subjective, intersubjective, and objective. So individual's preferences based on which if you are taking a judgment, that is subjective judgment. If the group to which one belongs based on the code that is given by desirability that is given by that culture group, if you are taking a stand, that becomes intersubjective. And objective judgment philosophy, it believes that there are certain universally acceptable preferences, universally acceptable rights and wrongs. Meaning it is based on the understanding that whatever one does, that shall be viewed in the light of what is the impact that is there on the others. Are you following? Simply said, objective judgment depends on the philosophy that there are what are called universal rights and universal wrongs. Subjective is individual. Intersubjective is when you are comparing two culture groups. When you are considering two culture groups, what that culture group trains you in is the basis on which you are taking a judgment, taking a stand. Whereas when it comes to the objective judgment, irrespective of to which culture group you belong, there is a code that you will have to follow. When I say universally, it is truly universal. I am not talking about individuals or individual culture groups. All the culture groups across time and space, they will have to follow one particular code. I'll give you an example for the first one here. When I say subjective judgment, based on your likes and dislikes, you take a stand. For instance, salmon is tasty. Salmon, I'm not talking about an individual, I'm talking about the fish there. Salmon is tasty. That tastes good for me, that may not be tasting good for you. For you, maybe idli sambar, somebody else, something else. It is individual's preference. I like this color. This color is good because that is my judgment. I'm bringing down to very simple things there. This may be a big one also. Secondly, when we say intersubjective judgments, see, every culture group comes up with a particular list of do's and don'ts. A very popular example people give in the explanation of cultural relativism is certain behavioral traits. जैसा मानो in some communities, it is considered to be very offensive if you are leaving some food unfinished on your table. The rule is you will have to finish it. If it is served on your plate, you will have to finish it. जो होगा बाद में देखा जाएगा. It is your duty to finish. If you are not finishing, it is considered to be offensive. Or, at least in certain communities, may not be in many of the Indian communities. In many communities, it is considered to be disrespectful to burp on the dining table. लंबे लंबे डकार लेते हैं, considered to be very offensive, not called as a decent behavior. You can actually look for all the indecent things that we do in the presence of the others. You may be good in all the other aspects, but these 1-2 irksome things might pull back your image in the people. One other very interesting and irritating thing I find is the way you have your tea. Some of us have this art of having tea with a lot of noise as if a tsunami is coming. So it's like a tea kapulo tufan laga. But then if at all an anthropologist has to respond to that situation, the viewpoint, cultural relativist viewpoint is, maybe that is giving him that necessary lutf. A tea you can enjoy only if it is seconded by, if it goes along with that sound. Personally, I tried certain times. But the problem is when to make the sound was a problem for me. Is it that first you make a sound, then take a sip? Or you finish taking a sip, then make a sound? Or both of them should go on together? If both of them should go on together, that was a problem for me. I couldn't take the tea as well as make the noise simultaneously. Maybe that's an art. So what is happening there is every culture group comes up with certain do's and don'ts. Sometimes there's a practice that even if you are finishing your food, you wait till the others have finished. If not with your family, at least when the guest comes. आप अपना देख लिए, खा लिया, कर लिया, and then गए हाथ धो लिया, and then you are watching the TV, leaving the guest all for himself. Guest has no clue whether to continue to eat. Because the food was actually tasty, he wanted to have more. But your behavior was not such. Some of us do this. Because when we don't want certain guests to come, spend long hours. There are many tricks so that you can drive them off. We will keep talking about that also. Don't apply them on me when I come to your house. When it comes to the third one, objective, this is what that comes as a major stumbling block for the concept of cultural relativism. When cultural relativism says that there is no universal right or wrong, you can bring it down to subjective judgment also. It is something like, I like using a pistol right from the middle of your head because I like it. I have taken a judgment. One fine day I got up. I looked at the way my husband is snoring. Don't talk about this to him. He doesn't actually, but just for an example's sake. I felt like using my licensed pistol. Dal diya. Because I like it. Now when a police comes to stop me, question me, I may say that it is my subjective judgment. And you have nothing to deal with it. It's as simple as my freedom ends where the other's nose starts. If you call for freedom, if you want to have freedom, there is nothing like an absolute freedom. Freedom is subject to so many restrictions. We are not simply talking about an individual for that matter. When we say that, okay, two different culture groups are there, respect their cultural identity and their preferences. If the same thing is happening from across the border, When he thinks that, okay, today my hands are itching, I'll have to kill somebody, so I will cross the border, eliminate one complete regiment there, and I go. People question, I say that no, I had some kind of... And this is my intersubjective judgment. Who tells you what is right and what is wrong? Who tells you what is right and what is wrong?
A bit is culturally.
What in culture tells you? Culture is a very broad thing. What in culture? Something called morality. Moral, the basic meaning is the one that tells you what is right and what is wrong. But we already have seen elsewhere in intersubjectivity, because anthropology is filled with several examples of intersubjectivity. In certain communities, consumption of beef is acceptable. In certain other communities, it is not acceptable. That is intersubjectivity. But I substitute the beef with something else. I introduce a human there. Consumption of human. Now you suddenly stand to protest, in spite of the fact that you are a regular beef eater, chicken eater, everything that flies, crawls, walks, swims, everything decorates your platter on a daily basis. But suddenly when it comes to humans being offered, when a guest comes, what's special today is human liver. I mean, that looks to be slightly offbeat. You can't digest. Meaning that there is emerging some kind of universal do's or don'ts that you are trying to arrive at. See, killing somebody unduly, without reason, and killing somebody for your own fancies cannot be accepted. Or for that matter, taking care of the elderly fellows or young fellows, these are the good behaviors. When we come to certain universally accepted, for instance, you have to be truthful, you are not supposed to lie. This is one of the very moral things that is being taught. How far we stick to it, that God knows. We know very well that except myself, He only knows whether what I am speaking is truth or not. But then the rule is there. Interesting thing here is the moral obligations, what we are speaking of, they are there, at least for the acceptance sake. What you do, result of it, that is secondary. Now, when it comes to objective judgments, objective judgment mechanism had been challenging cultural relativism. Cultural relativism may end up at doing things or giving or coming up with certain kinds of moral obligations, etc., which are subject to what that group is teaching. Now that's where we drive certain thinkers, especially the theologists, they come up with this discussion. Is there something like, what is the source of morality, number one? Having come to conclude on one particular source of morality, is morality subjective or objective? In the context of intersubjective, etc., we were mentioning this as subjective morality. When we say that there is no universal right or wrong, that is subjective morality. Can subjective morality be executed, say, in the world where there are global relations? Because globally we try to have some kind of a standard. This is what is desirable, this is not desirable. I am trying to bring this topic to you so that you can keep thinking on this. What is the source of morality? That is one that you should be thinking about, based on how you were actually encultured. Enculturation is the process through which you come to know what is moral, what is right, what is wrong. Otherwise, there is no difference between a butcher and the other fellow. Because butcher is actually doing what is right according to his morality. So you will have to know what is the source of your morality. I am actually trying to ask you to go back home and think on these lines. What is the source of your personal morality? What told you, what tells you, what is right, what is wrong? The source of it. Meaning that maybe I am hinting at something like, is there a moral law? Is that moral law subjective or objective? What is right, what is wrong? Is it that you are learning from nature casually as you are growing up in life? Or is there some force that tells you, yes, this is right, this is wrong? Actually, there are arguments between theists and atheists. The whole discussion takes us to theism and atheism. People who believe that there is a moral code that is objective. Only if it is objective, then it is valid for everybody. When I say it is subjective, only that group has certain set of rights and wrongs. When it is objective morality, that moral code is applicable to everybody. I'll give you one simple example. Say Abrahamic religions are there. In the whole lot of Abrahamic religions, more or less a 10 commandment scheme is followed. What is to be done, what not to be done. When I am saying that a 10 commandment scheme is there, they believe in some lawgiver. That is the basis of their moral law. Suppose you remove that moral lawgiver, meaning I am removing the supernatural from the scene. If I am removing the supernatural from the scene, who will tell you what is right and what is wrong? If somebody less than a non-human or somebody less than a supernatural God, if somebody other than that is mentioning to you what is right and what is wrong, whether you will be believing in that, whether you will follow it or not. I repeat my questions. First is, you will have to come to a conclusion. What is the source of your personal morality? Having come to a conclusion, see whether that source can be called a subjective moral law or an objective moral law. Thirdly, if you come to a conclusion that yes, this particular scripture of mine gives me the set of do's and don'ts. Suppose I believe that this supernatural is not there. If somebody else has to tell me what is right and what is wrong, who can be that individual? And if that individual tells me, whether I will believe or not. Those are the questions. If they are high-sounding, push them aside. If they are arousing some kind of thought process in you, because I understand you are studying a lot of ethics in general studies. These discussions, I think, are also a major part of your study. So morality is one, universal morality or objective morality. This is the one. So, sir, when you write about cultural relativism, you will have to mention, when you are concluding on Bovis, I did not formally dictate there. There are people who criticized cultural relativism because the arguments of objective judgments and intersubjective, subjective judgments, they actually question whether what you think is right for a culture group, can it be accepted unquestioningly? When you will have to live together, there has to be an order. If you are all alone on the planet Earth, maybe order would become secondary. More than one is there on the earth, you will have to follow sets of rules. And of course, we are going to have political anthropology, where we will see what kinds of rules we are going to come across. What are the controlling mechanisms? But then here, those 3-4 questions you think over, then we will keep coming back on that.
source of morality generally comes from religion,
Okay.
rather than first it will be first preference to religion.
That conclusion I wanted from you, because even before I start introducing topics of religion, whether you come to a conclusion that your morality has a basis in religion. And then the next question comes, if it is not religion, what could be the source? Any upbringing for that matter has an element of faith in it. Just imagine somebody is trying to bring up the child without bringing in the discussions, the talk of the religion or God. How convenient or how difficult it is when compared to somebody who is using God as a mechanism of upbringing. This was what I was actually looking for. I am not preaching any religion here. But then, because the topic of religion is there, functionality of religion is one of the topics that we will be talking about. So religion, one of the things that is giving us is moral code. And once we go to comparative religions in our syllabus, we will see the moral code of one religion is different from the moral code of the other. Of course, we will not be concluding on which is the better one. That's a different story. But we will have a comparison of different moral codes. And then we will see why a particular religion seems to be violating more on the moral code. That is the anthropological examination. For now, you try to come to a conclusion whether religion is the basis of your moral code. If not religion, what can take up this as an alternative? Did you get my questions? Okay. If you have got, very fine. If you haven't got, all the more fine. Let me take you elsewhere. Today we are starting with discussions about Malinowski. This is that man. Bronislaw Malinowski. You can see his picture. Very beautiful hairstyle there. And the typical spectacles to show that he is a very studious fellow, studying more than necessary. ఆనందపడ్డారు మళ్ళీ. I'll just give the background. Then we'll watch a couple of small videos about him, 2 or 3, 10 minutes each. We'll try writing a few things. Then come back to have a full-fledged discussion, because this is a big man, a 60 marks fellow. And now for you, a 25, 30 marks fellow. It is not simply that in his own question he comes in the exam. He can enter any question in the exam. Because whole lot of anthropologists, especially in India, were influenced by him. To give a basic idea about him, he believed not in theory. He had a strong fieldwork. He was not making the mistakes as Bowers, his teacher, was making. He was not trying to gather facts just for the sake of gathering. He wanted to be in the field, go through the whole process, so that you understand why they do what they do. So when I was saying this, when people make so much of noise in eating, drinking, etc., you can understand why they do it only if you participate in that. I'll give you one very beautiful example here. With increasing the vehicles on the road, small brush-throughs of the vehicles is a commonality. You'll have to understand that, okay, there's so much of traffic, roads are not expanding, and that new drivers are coming onto the roads, half-learned fellows. It's a general tendency that when small brushing happens there, irrespective of the damage, you are on the task, you are on the war footing there. You would leave the vehicle on the middle of the road, come down, and then you have all kinds of beautiful linguistic acclaims for them. You don't understand that the rest of the traffic is actually waiting. You are creating more ruckus than what inconvenience that person had caused to you. As I grew as a child, I always had this fancy of enjoying these fights on the roads. I loved watching them. Even when I was in the college, if something happened, some small rupture here and there, I would get down from the bus where I was going. From college, if I'm going, I'll get down, I'll spend time on the road, watch how people are actually fighting. And occasions were there when they actually go to the police station, I also go there. And that has a lot of kick, I must say. Seeing people fighting, enjoying how the fight is. Unfortunately, one occasion my father saw me doing all this. He followed me and what I was doing, and then finally he calls and says, "Nahi, ye theek hai, but not at the expense of your classes." But it was a beautiful thing. On one occasion, he said, "Main bhi tumhare saath chalunga. Let's see what you're doing on the road." Maybe that was a participant observation. Why I was enjoying, maybe he wanted to cross-check by going through the whole process. People have a hell of a lot of time to fight, and people like me have the whole world's time to watch them. I think this is a basic human tendency. We enjoy when others are having a problem and others are fighting. This was a man of that kind. He would enjoy the whole lot of things, experience the problems. He was not trying to give any solutions. He was trying to report. Reporting was his duty, not to give the solutions. He was having that inquisitiveness. This was one, not a strong theoretician, but then he was a major field worker. He, as the name suggests, he was a German, but for all practical purposes, he called himself a Briton. Because he had this fancy to become a Briton. Nationality you can't change, but your behavioral traits, your lifestyle you can change. He always loved seeing the British. It's an unusual combination. The time at which we are talking about him, that was a time when Germans always took pride in themselves. They would not even tolerate the British. But this seems to be an odd man there. He loved the things, the way people do in the British society. That's where he was actually more inclined towards studying in London School of Economics. And then from there, that's the place where he was studying anthropology. And that's where British also claim that he's a British anthropologist, because the kind of work that he has given. With that background, and certain here and there I have mentioned a few things about him. One other very valuable thing I would mention. He calls himself a functionalist. So this is one man who announced what he is. He called himself a functionalist, and that he demonstrated by the way he was taking up things from the field. He believed in one concept called integrationalism. Why I'm using this is when you watch the videos, occasionally that name comes, the term comes. You know by now what is culture trait. The individual cultural elements the smallest possible cultural elements. By integrationalism, what he meant was all the culture traits are linked to one another. If a change occurs in one culture trait, it would result in changes in the rest of them. That is the concept of integrationalism. A change in one culture trait would bring changes in all the rest of complex things in culture. Everything is interconnected. Everything is interconnected. One example I remember to have given you somewhere. Suppose you were having hunting and gathering as a popular economic subsistence. The rest of the cultural aspects would be based on how you are actually earning your living. If you are a hunter-gatherer, you have the typical forage way of living. You wouldn't have too many belongings to carry from one place to the other. Less luggage, more comfort. Or no luggage at all. You would only take your bodies wherever you go, because without them you can't move. But otherwise, if you look at the sharing mechanism, the kind of kinship relations that you have, I think everything revolves around the food getting. I may quickly bring it to this conclusion that maybe everything revolves around money when I say economics. That's a big conclusion I made without looking at how things must have evolved from hunting gathering to modern societies, how money had come and what all things money substituted, things like that. I'm not getting into all that, but then quickly, if I'm cutting short the entire story, if one element gets altered, it's as simple as how an individual is treated in the household, if he is an earning member, if he is a non-earning member. As long as you are earning, you are everything for the group. You may get offended when I say this, but when you are all alone in the house, you think on these lines. I'm not trying to break your family, though I enjoy doing. Just imagine you are not a non-earning member, or maybe for that matter, this is another very painful thing we see in the families. As long as the old man is serving, he has a different respect in the household. The moment he gets retired, falls sick on the bed, you can't think of the agony there. Because after all, everything goes with this. Today we are at a time where we almost can believe that everything and anything can be bought, can be purchased with money, including love and affection. That's a very valid and valuable statement. He was a man who wrote extensively on what is called economic subsistence. Look at your syllabus, chapter 3, paper 1. There are a couple of terms there called formalistic and substantivist, formalist and substantivist arguments. Formalist and substantivist argument. It is in this context he was trying to bring the significance of economics and how you understand economics in different societies, etc. So a long story to go there. So that's the reason why I was saying this man enters every question in the exam. Name the thinkers they claim to be functionalists in India. For example, you have D.N. Majumdar, who is a functionalist, who worked as a functionalist and claims that he's a functionalist. Or for that matter, you have M.N. Srinivas, who, though he wrote extensively in the diffusionist fashion, he is also functionalist. You can see that kind of writing there. Many thinkers for that, if I'm trying to generalize there, many of the contemporary anthropologists are still functionalists. After functionalism, several other schools have come. But the utility of functionalism still seems to be continuing. So if at all any school had lived the longest period of time, we can say that functionalism is the one that had a long life and still continuing. It's that few people would keep leaving the field, but there is a fan following that is continuing for them. ఆయన వదిలేసి వెళ్ళిపోయినా 150 సినిమా కోసం వెయిట్ చేస్తున్నాం కదా, that it will be there. That is one other painful thing that had happened in my life. He leaving film industry. I am talking about our megastar for the people who do not know what I am talking about.
The story of Bronislaw Malinowski is one of the greatest tales in anthropology. Almost 100 years ago, his short visit to some remote islands of Papua New Guinea turned into a 4-year odyssey. Here, Malinowski started a revolution in anthropology. He left behind the colonial settlements to live cheek by jowl with the natives. His experience would overturn the Victorian notion of the simple savage and transform the way we look at our own society. But with the publication of his private diaries in 1967, a complex truth about the man began to come out. Who really was Malinowski, and what drove him to become the founder and hero of modern social anthropology? In 1942, at Yale University, some battered notebooks were found on top of a cupboard. They were the private diaries of Bronislaw Malinowski, the man who founded modern social anthropology. For a further 25 years, these diaries were a closely guarded secret, until 1967, when their publications sent shockwaves through the world of anthropology.
His attitude was rather unpleasant and rather superior, and not an ideal model for younger anthropologists.
The diaries from this hero was shown to have feet of clay, to be a lustful, indiscreet, arrogant, lying, racist at times. He was all the things that they wished he wasn't.
The diaries laid bare the dark side of a revered academic figure. This film reveals a man driven close to the edge of reason in his passionate pursuit not only of a new science, but of his own power and prestige. London, 1910. The bustling hub of the British Empire and the greatest city in the world. That March, a poor but well-born young Pole arrived and fell in love.
My Anglomania has become something more akin to a mystic cult, worshipping at the altar of British culture.
Fascinated by England's social structure, Malinowski desired to be part of the upper classes.
I both admire and fear the English way of life. Its elegance and refinement. Indeed, they are the very aristocracy of the nations. A highly superior nation where one is only tolerated if one is amusing.
His surviving daughter and great-grandson bear out his desire for acceptance.
There's a photograph of him at a dinner party, and he's obviously very pleased that he's with Sir Thingamy and Lord Whatnot and the Duchess of Blah, and who's to blame him? No.
Me.
You. Okay, well, you're an American. You can't help yourself.
Without personal wealth to help him on his way, Malinowski would have to rely on the one thing he did have: brains.
I'm determined that I shall be accepted into this aristocracy. And the one thing I have to proffer is my extraordinary intellect. It is this that will make me important. I shall be an eminent scholar. Do you think?
His brains took him to the London School of Economics, where he plumped for the little understood subject of anthropology. It means literally the study of man. As the British Empire expanded, it encountered a world of mysterious tribes, cannibals, and curious traditions. The Victorians wanted to find a way of classifying these bizarre and exotic cultures.
Collecting objects was part of that process of making sense of human variety, and the different objects that people made and used were indicative in many ways of the sorts of societies that they had.
To Victorians, the people who made these objects appeared savage. And what's more, these savages performed magic, tattooed their bodies, and even practiced promiscuous sex. Their lifestyle sent decent Victorian folk into a spin of moral panic and terror.
In the popular mind, a savage was someone who was at the mercy of their emotions, wasn't fully in control of their rational thought, and therefore was sort of blown hither and thither by changing emotional forms. Right at the heart of the notion of savagery were both sex and violence, basically.
The study of these savages and everything they did was anthropology. Its experts were respectable gentlemen who considered the savage was best studied from a safe distance.
These were known as armchair anthropologists, people who lived in places like London, Oxford, New York, and either didn't travel very much themselves or didn't travel at all. And what they did was, often by writing letters, was to get a whole series of accounts from travellers and colonial officials, missionaries around the world, about the customs of the people that they were in contact with.
Perusing these reports in their armchairs, they formulated a theory on savage life.
The usual idea was that these people were so-called primitive people. They were more or less equivalent to the most ancient of our own ancestors. And so they must represent something which is the opposite of ourselves. If we are monogamous, they must be promiscuous. If we live in homes, they must be nomadic. if we are rational people believing in all sorts of rational things, they just are completely enthralled to superstition believing, and so on and so on. So they are the opposite of ourselves, however we imagine ourselves.
Off on the trek into the heart of the Never Never, the expedition is nearing the country inhabited by the real bad men of Australia, wild blacks who have never seen a white, prehistoric beings sprung from a race said to be 500,000 years old.
Savages seem to be a throwback to a prehistoric past, and their primitive societies the relics of man's march towards civilization.
Almost always it was Australian Aboriginal people were seen to be at the bottom of the ladder of evolution, and then there were chiefly societies, people like the Tahitians and so on, who were part way up, and then came the state societies of the Chinese, and then laughable to us a little bit further up were other European nations like the Italians, who are said to be a bit sort of irrational and emotional, and of course right at the pinnacle of evolution were the good old rational.
What you should be studying from the videos is, there is this series, that's
If it
the
doesn't
title.
call itself a family.
Tales from the Jungle. Tales from the Jungle, in the series 1, 2, 4 and 5. 3 and 6 are different ones. 1, 2, 4 and 5. Especially when you go to 4, you see his participation in the day-to-day life of these savages. Sir, when you look at these videos, there are a few things that you will have to focus on. I will first start talking from the contributions of Malinowski to the understanding of economics in the simple societies. Let me give you a small list of things to learn from him that makes him a big man. Actually, I was putting a star mark there that became a symbol. His emergence in anthropology, similar to Beauvois, came from the critique to evolutionism and diffusionism. It's a rarity that a question is asked, a jumbo one in today's times. Write an essay on contributions of Malinowski. That is a very huge question. But you will be more or less preparing for that answer with all the necessary details inside. The places where the star mark is mentioned, those are the 3 that can be asked as independent big questions. Malinowski's contributions to fieldwork in anthropology, theory of functionalism, theory of needs. I'll be explaining a few things and we will be writing extensively about him tomorrow. And all of us know that you enjoy writing. I really feel very happy that many of you have very beautiful handwritings. Seriously. All the scripts that I was evaluating, I didn't find it inconvenient to read any of the scripts. This is really amazing. Many times, the writer takes the reader for granted. Like how a teacher takes the student for granted. చెప్పేవాడికి వినేవాడు లోకు అని. जी sir.
After the criticisms of the diffusionism and evolutionism, do the schools still exist, or has anyone
in a modified form? Because even today, we study, we believe, we use evolution and diffusion. Without those two, the comprehensive understanding is not possible. So after so many schools have emerged in anthropology today, it becomes difficult to be subscribed to one single approach of understanding culture. So all the schemes to some extent or the other be applied to understand how and why cultures exist in the way. Because no single approach may be able to give a comprehensive understanding. When he has asked this question that takes me to a topic in your syllabus called Origin of Caste in India. Your syllabus mentions theories of origin of caste. There are about 7-8 different theories. I am giving you a very interesting way of answering these questions. Don't forget these tips, sir. Generally, if a question of theory of origins is asked in anthropology, in the introduction and conclusion parts, a common thing has to be written. We go with a strong belief that only one such question will be asked in the exam. He will not be asking more than one question on origin theories. If God forbidden that has happened, you will have to modify your introductions and conclusions. When 7 or 8 different theories are given, talking about one single cultural trait, caste must have originated from maybe Varna, maybe from somewhere else, maybe from somewhere else. Those 7-8 theories, whatever may be the topic for that matter, 2 major conclusions you will make. One is, I can't go back in time because all these social institutions seem to have existed, seems to have emerged at a time before the art of writing had started. So we don't know clearly when this must have started. And then Srinivas comes to our rescue. He says, don't try to waste your time. It's a futile effort to go and try finding the origins of every culture trait, any culture trait. Second conclusion you will make is, no theory in itself is complete. In order to understand the origins might be because of multiple reasons. So all the theories have to be used to some extent. Did you understand? Just before the exam, people come to ask me, give us certain tips. What we struggle to give you in about 3 to 4 months of time, I can't give them. It sounds to me slightly, uncomfortable and ridiculous sometimes. Over a phone call, ma'am, how to prepare for anthropology? I don't know what to say. I can't say that come join the class, it looks to be an advertisement. And I am hard pressed for time, I can't give him more than a particular amount of time teaching the whole thing on a phone call. If it was possible, you would not be here. But then when I am saying that these are the tips, you register them in your mind. Now, coming to this man. Somehow, sir, all the theorists, irrespective of whether they are functionalists X, Y, Z, it's like, before you start writing anything, just Bismillah likhte ho, Om likhte ho. Before you give your theory, you abuse evolutionist and diffusionist. If you haven't abused them, you are not a modern anthropologist. After that, you start giving your theory. But knowingly or unknowingly, openly or in a hidden way, you are using the concepts given by evolutionism and diffusionism. The only problem is, the way they must have explained the concepts, they made some mistakes. Later theories are now using them in a more positive way, more evolved way. Now, above anything else, I would want to start with his contributions to economic anthropology, and then a word about his fieldwork. I had on certain other occasion told you that his choice of studying the so-called those islands in Papua New Guinea region, that is not because he wanted to do, he had to do it. ఆవిడ ప్రేమించింది, నేను ప్రేమించాల్సి వచ్చింది, అంతేగాని నేను ప్రేమించాలనుకోలేదు కదా. Certain things happen. You are forced to do things. So the love that he had for anthropology, one, he was driven to it by Fraser, who is more than a poisonous fellow. He would introduce this poison of anthropology in people who actually didn't know what culture was and get them addicted to anthropology. So much so that you leave everything behind, pack your bag and go to some unknown places in the world. Somehow with the kind of experience Malinowski had and the way people were writing without visiting, and also because of the training that he had got with Boas, he started giving guidelines to the future anthropologists about what to do for fieldwork. When I'm saying guidelines, so meticulously giving the guidelines, including small things like what to carry when you are going to a place. It is unlike the Boasian approach. He would even recommend, certain pencils and then pens and scribbling pads. It looks childish when somebody is mentioning, see, when you are going there, you carry these things as a field worker. And what are the kinds of foods that you will have to carry with you? Because he experienced not having the kind of food that he ate generally back home. He was not finding that kind of a food. And it is very entertaining to see those videos where he says that, see, I'm hating this food, I hate the tropics, I hate the disease. Because those are all malaria-stricken areas where he was forced to live. And just imagine all the others whom he was seeing are naked, not really the so-called civilized. He was the only fellow who was sporting all that extra clothing unnecessarily, and then oka cap, daniko billa. This looks to be more than necessary. But then from his experience he was writing tinned foods, preserved foods that you'll have to carry, a tent that you'll have to carry, the kind of clothing, you should know the climatic conditions, then take the required clothing there. It is for your own self and for others what you'll have to carry. Don't forget to carry a gift when you're going to the others. You'll have to gift. What kind of gift you give them, that has to be planned properly. Not that when you go to visit a Savage, you present him a laptop because you found a very latest one. This is a big science, actually, what you'll have to give to the people. What may be the response that you would get, because you don't know their culture. Gift is very important. What is the best gift that you can give to anybody? What is the best gift that you can give to anybody? Spice. Huh? Sir? Smile. ఏం చేసుకోవడానికి? పచ్చడి పెట్టుకొని తిన్నాం తప్ప. That brings me to a very interesting statement that was given by Tyler. When you want to build relations between your culture group and maybe an enemy culture group, the best gift that you can give is the female. If somebody is gifting you a female, you won't say no. No kada. Endukanta? Female is the best gift that one can offer to the other cultures. When I'm saying offering a female, not simply like that, offering a female in marriage, quote unquote. Because for Taylor, to establish, strengthen the relations between the culture groups, different culture groups or enemy culture groups, Marriage is the best way of strengthening, establishing, and making a permanent relation there. Maybe Akbar had understood Taylor very well. He had used the weapon of marriage to silence all his enemies. That is one of the gifts that he was talking about. Now, in the fieldwork, he was a participant observer. Bowes was not a participant observer. You must have watched that video, Shackles of Tradition. There you could see that he was not participating in the whole thing, but he was reporting religiously on every small thing. When it comes to Malinowski, a distant learning does not give you a total understanding, and hence you will have to participate so much so that. I am trying to link it with something in economics there. Did you see this picture before also? I think I must have shown you this. You're not writing anything as of now. Just look at the picture and enjoy. The white-clad fellow is Malinowski. Understandable, actually. The rest of the people, especially, sir, I'll increase the font for the last benchers. You are my... maybe I'll do something else. Left side, second one from you. I love that hairstyle. Such a huge one. Just imagine when you have to trim it. Actually, you need not have to comb. I'm not a racist. I'm saying that I love the hairstyle and those, I don't remember what you call, garden में जो हम वो scissors use करते हैं ना. I mean, I think it looks to be that. I'm not a racist again. Something inquisitive in that picture. I mean, they are holding certain things in their hands. अब वहां से आपको मैं क्या बताऊं? आप इधर शिफ्ट कर लो फिर. Maybe, these 3-4 people I always have a concern, but somehow you seem to be preferring that. ना आप हमेशा इधर ही बैठते हो. I don't know why. जैसा कि you're putting a kerchief as if everybody is looking for that seat, and you'll have to plan first. Maybe you can pull yourself there. There's something that they are holding in their hands. What could that be? Cold drink, Coca-Cola. Anything that resembles with what you might be using on a regular basis? Huh? Hookah. We have the best of places in Hyderabad that serve the hookah in various delicacies. Further details, you can meet me after the class. That clearly shows how different and distinct he was. These were the people that he had studied at those points of time. His fieldwork was spread across 2 groups of islands. One was called the Mailu group, the other is Trobriand Islands. That was the time period. Trobriand Islands he visits on 2 occasions. Mailu and Trobriand Islands. I am trying to present to you something that he was doing in the Trobriand Islands. His major focus, of course, was economics. How people were exchanging things. When I say exchange, you may be exchanging goods, you may be exchanging services. How you exchange against what you are giving something, that's what he was studying. Let me now give you the meaning of the term formalism and substantivism. Can I talk? I didn't expect that you will go on scribbling. But then, I'm talking about Malinowski. At a theoretical level, he is called a functionalist because he saw function in every culture trait that he was observing. He also believed that if change occurs in one culture trait, all the rest of the others would change. This he called integrationalism. He was a very serious, massive field worker. He tried a lot of techniques in the field. He was not simply writing the personal diaries. He was a participant observer. For participant observation, what was very much vital was learning the language. He did that. He had nothing else to do. But see, he was also, I have written something in the second point there. Though you are there on the field, you cannot be there everywhere in the field. At a time when you don't know the language of the natives, and also when certain activities are simultaneously happening at different places in the culture group, you have to depend on somebody else whom you are appointing as informers. Informers are the people who try to give you the cultural information. It's an art, it's altogether a science of how you appoint, how you choose somebody as an informer. Informer here is a positive tone, not a negative one. Say, for example, a series of rituals happen on certain religious occasions or on occasions of marriage. So many rituals simultaneously would be happening at different places. Being an ethnographer, you cannot be there at every place, and hence you will have to by default depend on somebody from that group who can give you valuable inputs. Sometimes what might happen is the informer might give you certain wrong information, fabricate information for you. Sometimes, the things that are not there, he is trying to give you so that you think high of their culture. So if that is the situation, the ethnographer should be able to identify whether, so cross-checking has to be there. All this is the backdrop based on which he would be writing ethnographs. Beautiful, practical-oriented writings he brought into light. Now, his interest in economics made him to think on certain lines. That is, how one can understand economic behavior of individuals. How one can understand economic behavior of the individuals. And is there any non-economic element involved in the economic behavior? Understand closely. How can we understand your economic behavior? Maybe that is how the market thing works these days. Economic behavior. How can I attract people, or why people prefer certain things? What should I do so that the book that I wrote has to have sales? That's a big art, actually. I'm still postponing certain book exhibitions for you. I'll give you one example. We have this lady, anthropologist called Margaret Mead, who is going to come to us in a couple of days. Margaret Mead is an authority on the art of writing books and naming the books. She used to give training to her youngsters in the universities. How to write a book, how to increase the sales of your book, and then how to name your books. Just imagine you go to a shop, where there is a dilapidated book with the title Anthropology. There is one other book on the sidelines, Sex and Temperament in Three Primitive Societies. Which one will you buy? Though madam has asked you to buy a book of anthropology, that wo kabhi bhi milta hai. I mean, that will be there. Nobody will buy that. But Sex and Temperament in Three Primitive Societies looks to be very interesting. Naming the books is very much important. That art that was very much learnt by Marvin Harris. Yesterday somebody asked, who is Marvin Harris? A contemporary anthropologist who had analyzed all the theories. Now coming back here, Malinowski's interest was in economics. He was trying to raise two questions. One is how to understand economic behavior of people. Secondly, is there an element of non-economics involved in the economic behavior? As we unfold our discussion, you will come to understand what I am speaking about. This whole discussion that Malinowski had introduced, with certain others contributing, that became a subject matter in economic anthropology called substantivism and formalism. First I will define those two words. Because without them, the examination of Malinowski's works on economics, economic studies in the tribes, would be incomplete. You may scribble those definitions there. By formalism, what we mean is, economics in simple society. Economics in simple society can be understood with the principles of modern economics. With the principles of modern economics. Continue writing there. Modern economics alone is sufficient to understand economic behavior. In simple and complex societies. This is not a formal dictation. We are only trying to know the meaning of these two words. So formalism believes that economic behavior in simple societies can be understood by applying principles of modern economics, number one. Secondly, modern economics alone is sufficient to understand economic behavior both in simple and complex societies. Anything else is not necessary. The second one, substantivism. Substantivism is a school that believes that principles of modern economics, substantivism believes that principles of modern economics are insufficient and cannot be applied injudiciously, to study economies, in simple societies. To study economies in simple societies. So everything is revolving around a word called principles of modern economics. There are certain principles like demand and supply, or something like profit maximization. In modern economics, what you try to do is maximization of your profit, or you try to store your profit, you try to have a surplus. So there are certain things like, profit maximization and accumulation of surplus and modern money to be used as an exchange. These are some of the things. I mean, there are a hell of a lot of others, some of you who have done economics. Having this in mind, if we go forth with a couple of examples there. If formalism was true, any economic behavior can be understood by the modern principles. Maybe that there is nothing like a non-economics involved in the economics. Simply put, how can one understand, how can a modern economic thinker understand why you indulge in an act that is not profitable? Why you indulge in an act that is not profitable? As simple as somebody had gone to a pilgrimage, they have got some prasad. In order to get the prasad, you travel all the way 3 hours from one corner of the city to the other, only to take a pinch of ash that he must have got as a prasad, or the laddu that is already spoiled. You can't throw away because it is prasad. Even if it would result in some kind of a health issue, you are supposed to have it, because he had been storing it for you for the last 10 days. You couldn't find time, now you found time, you're going there. In the drudgery of traffic, you take all pain, so much money involved, but then you are going there to get something that is economically not really worth it. Or there is no significant economic element there. You can actually apply it to your own life. You might be doing several things of economically not valuable. Or maybe you are giving up a lot of economic wealth for something that is insignificant in terms of economics. You can look at your own self. Are you with me, sir? Are you with me, sir? Are you with me? You should be with me because you paid me. Once you finish all these discussions with a reasonable understanding, rest of the things will fall in place. I repeat what I was talking about. Formalism, substantivism. Formalism says everything can be understood by economics, because humans do everything for profit, for surplus, for their own self. You might be doing certain things unmindful of economics. Anything? You're not really bothered about the economics. You're doing certain things. Ma? Donations in temples. You're not expecting anything there. Why are you donating? Why are you donating? Papam baga pandipoyi. ఏమనుకోవద్దు, తప్పుగా అనుకోవద్దు, అర్థమే లేదనుకుంటే. ఓన్లీ మదర్, ఫాదర్కి లేదా? ఎంత పార్షియాలిటీ. దట్స్ వేర్ కోవిడ్ కమ్స్. ఫాదర్ హ్యాస్ టు ప్రూవ్ హిమ్సెల్ఫ్ టైమ్ అండ్ అగైన్. శ్రీనివాస్ గారి గజల్లాగా ఫాదర్ హ్యాస్ టు ప్రూవ్ ఫ్రమ్ టైమ్ టు టైమ్ దట్ సీ ఐ ఎమ్ యువర్ ఫాదర్. So what? Or maybe affection for the parents, or parental affection towards you, may be unquantifiable. Of course, gone are the times when this is a valid statement. Any relation and every relation has some economic element. I am not belittling the parental love or your love towards your parents, but somewhere the economic equation I think आ ही जाता है. कितने साल पढ़ाएंगे यूपीएससी के लिए? कुछ कर लो, बाद में भी लिख लेना. क्या है, कितने साल लिखोगे? My sincere advice, this is another life tip. So long as your parent is ready to bear you for UPSC, you finish your journey, either this side or that side. Everybody's patience has a limit. और बताएं? Certain things. हाँ जी sir.
Unnecessary social payments.
నువ్వు unnecessary అంటున్నావు కదా. Maybe you can drop the word.
I mean, NGO service.
NGO service. I knew this should come. I knew this will come. Or maybe the whole lot of topic of love itself. Whether who is involved in the love, whether you are the so-called lover there, the love between yourself and your parent, the love between yourself and the sibling, love between yourself and the God, or the demon, or the devil, whatever. At many places, the concept of love challenges economics. Now, it is here. I'll also give one other example, continuing with the journey with the God. You go through so much of pain, and of course, economics is anyway involved in taking the long trip there. Such a treacherous journey to have a glimpse of the God there. Some people try to travel by foot, some people, but then you stand in long queues just to have a glimpse of Balaji. Such a magnificent idol there. Everything that happens to Balaji, you can pay and you can have a glimpse. When his clothes are changed, when he's taking bath, when he's put to sleep, when everything. You're looking for that one small glimpse. People are pushing you from there. Why the whole thing? Just because darshanam baagayindandi, prasantanga undi. You are going for that one glimpse of darshan. So much of economics involved. Later, LP Vidyarthi comes up. How God is creating business. Religion is a big business. God is a business. Now, we are going to see in him that everything cannot be explained economically. When he goes to Trobriand Islands, when you take notes, I'll make you draw these things. Right now, you don't bother. Drawing that region is also very important. This and several other pictures we will keep mailing to you based on the importance of them. This is really there. It is not that we are cooking a story of Malinowski. Malinowski survived. He existed on this earth. He traveled to this place, Papua New Guinea, you know. Eastern half of that island. And there are so many other islands there. We are going to learn the names of them. Tube, Missima, Dobu, etc., etc. This was the paradise of anthropology where he was living in. Whether it's a paradise or hell that he had to tell. What interested him was economic exchange. There are several other things, but economic exchange is one. He found that those small islands, at a time when modern communication, modern transport was not there, they still maintained contact. And the blue-colored lines are the lines through which trading operates. That's the sea route through which you will be traveling from one island to the other. Blue-orange, ఏదో అన్నాను. ప్రింట్ తప్పులు బాగా కనబడతాయి, అక్షర దోషాలు. What is interesting there is the people belonging to those islands, they have a very clearly laid out plan of who will travel for trade and what will you trade in. So there are some white colored arrow marks there. Suppose you belong to an island out there called Marshall and Bennett Islands, and you are traveling to Woodlark Island. Only certain goods you can exchange with them. Some bit of necklace is there. But you cannot, just because you have gone there, I have given you something, give back something so that I go. The relationship is not like that. Your duty is maybe you will go there, give what you plan to give, go back. They will come to you. In a counterclockwise direction when people are moving, there are certain other goods which they will be carrying with them, and that time you will receive. Meaning that there are certain items that can be exchanged in a clockwise direction, certain exchanges can happen only in the counterclockwise direction. And what are these items? How do they look? And how do they travel? This is a special canoe. This whole exchange system is called Kula-ring. K-U-L-A, Kula-ring. Kula exchange, as it is called. Kula exchange is a complex process which actually goes by what is called reciprocity. Reciprocity, you understand. Reciprocity is exchange of something. There are different definitions there. One of the primary definitions of reciprocity is you give away certain things without expecting anything back, at least immediately. Or there is no involvement of money. But in the modern times when I say reciprocity, what you might understand is, you gave something, I have to give you something back immediately. No time gap. You have offered me a cup of coffee today. Right from the last minute of I finished your coffee, you are expecting me to call you for a coffee. You have to settle this balance immediately. There should be no time gap. But here it is not that way. These are those intricately designed canoes. Very small ones. People who must have studied geography of that region, those are the turbulent seas. In the turbulent seas, they travel over these canoes to reach there. In order to get, sir, if you watch the video, there is a lady who shows all those items which they actually exchange. Look something like that. Actually, these are the ones photographed in a museum, cleaned up and maintained properly. But they are not so very elegant if you actually see the one. Very greasy, very flimsy. But then sometimes, the flimsy, the one with a bad odor, not so very nice to touch and wear also. Sometimes we preserve, we keep on wearing, using them. Because we have certain traditions. Tradition, you understand? What's the meaning of tradition? Tradition is what? What's the tradition? किससे बात कर रहे हो? Okay. I was thinking that maybe you are already in communication with somebody who is missing you already. I was asking something. Tradition. What's a tradition?
Which was clan followers.
Clan followers over there. Common beliefs, practices. Through the tradition is something that is handed over to us from the previous generations. Tradition, as formal definition, is something that is handed over to us across generations. So when you say that, we will come to that. అంటే అన్నీ ఒకటేసారి ఇస్తే అన్నీ కలిసిపోయి కిచిడీలాగా తయారవుతాయి మెల్లగా స్లోగా. I'll tell you. I'll talk about custom, habit, hobby. Tradition is something that is handed over to you from the previous generations. So several traditions are there. We have a tradition of civil service in our family, meaning that once you are born, you have to be an officer in civil services. I tell you this. I mean, this is a very private thing between you and me. Private and I share with the close ones. There's nobody much closer than a student. I have a little fellow who is about 4 now. So the other day, half the anthropology he learned when he was there inside, because I used to teach and then he was there. Rest of the half, once I delivered, he used to be there just outside the class listening to what is happening. So now if somebody asks, what does your mother do? He says she teaches anthropology. He is about 3 years, 8 months now. He teaches anthropology. Then what is anthropology? Anthropology is study of man. So I thought maybe when I'm not able to take a class, maybe the little fellow can come here. He can teach anthropology. And one very interesting thing what he did at 2 years. Many of us, only after coming to anthropology, studying anthropology, we come to understand what is knuckle walking. Maybe people from biology background, you must have been doing this. Knuckle walking, walking on the fist walking. Gorillas do knuckle walking. So at 2 years, if you ask him, how does a gorilla walk? He says knuckle walking and he starts showing. Then I thought maybe anthropology is the tradition there. That it is coming from one generation to the other. Like how there's a tradition of police officers in the family, teachers in the family teaching, or politics runs in our blood. और कुछ नहीं करे तो politics कर ले. And there also if you are failing, UPSC is there. These are the very flimsy things that they carry. In our families, in some of the families, there is this tradition. Your grandfather had owned some garment, कच्छा उनका था. I mean, that was a tradition कि शादी में वही पहनो. However flimsy the things are, you will have to carry the same sari, you wear it, I mean the same kind of ornaments. Though they are outdated, it is primarily because they have used it. They have a value because somebody had used it. And there is something very interesting that he found. When do you generally share? If you have to share with others, when is it that you share? When you have surplus. Mostly when you have surplus. When you are in a very tight condition there's not much with you, there's scarcity there. You don't think of जो एक रोटी बचा है ऐसा नहीं कि जो आया उसको दे दो आप पानी पीकर सो जाओ. I mean, we are not in that Satyug. And one other problem is how much is required to fill our belly. That's also an unlimited one. So these days the question of sharing emerges as a last resort. You rarely share. And even if you share when you have abundantly. Here, an interesting thing he found, and several anthropologists who visited the same region later, they also found that whatever you call the kula item is considered to be giving you pride. We have this practice of showing off. You have something, you show off. Or you have something and hence people are jealous of you. These people try to eliminate jealousy because if somebody is jealous of you, they might apply magic against you. They don't want to be subject to magic, and hence if something of very a prided thing comes to them, they would want to get rid of it as soon as possible. So the Kula item, when it reaches them, in less than a year's time, they will have to dispose of. After Malinowski, the students of Lorna Marshall visit the place. They had gifted certain bead necklaces to some of the people. For their surprise, after a year's time when they had gone there, they found each of the individual was holding one bead. So they broke off the necklaces and distributed to everybody so that people do not look at you with that jealous and you feel that pride that, see, I have this. Now, when you were listening to that documentary, the last couple of sentences before I stopped, he was saying that things are placed in a very simple way by the earlier ethnographers, but it is not like that. Their life is very complex. He tried to unravel the complexity there. There was a general opinion that simple societies are very simple. We already started writing this time and again. Simple societies, everything is not simple about them. Their families, their economics, they are not so very simple. You would see that people actually used to move out from their safe places of stay, go on treacherous journeys from one island to the other. It is not that everybody was to go. There was a particular social stratification that was there in the Trobriand Island. Only the leaders would go, not everybody. Only the males would go, not the females and children. And they knew very clearly when they were going on a journey from one island to the other, when I go to that island, with whom I will be exchanging my items, I know very clearly. Because these are the relations that have been established as a tradition from generations. My grandfather used to go to that island, there was a family with whom he used to exchange. And when you are going there, people looking at the canoe, the kind of decoration that you made of the canoe, people understood for whom that canoe is coming. Interestingly, Malinowski traveled along with them in the canoes. But then back home in the diary, he used to write. He was writing, why is it that I have chosen to travel, take such a treacherous journey? I am so very afraid that I might die. I might not go back. But such a thing he cannot write in his formal book. Somewhere he has to write, and there has to be an outlet. Outlet is very important. Junior NTR cheppadu, outlet chala important. Otherwise everything would get piled up and you burst out somewhere. All the expressions, all the feelings, they have to be expressed, whether it is love, anger, lust, whatever. You'll have to express. It's only that you will have to find out the best occasion and mode of expressing. Now, I am not a love guru to teach how you do all that here. But eventually we'll do that also. It is here I want to introduce one concept. Look at paper 2, chapter 3. Simple is not complex. The one that may be at the early levels of evolution in terms of maybe familial systems, economic systems, political systems. See, the terminology of simple and complex, this is actually seen as a variant of primitive. As a substitute, we brought it. We wanted to have a better appreciative word to substitute something like a derogatory word of primitive. But you understand that simple is a respect that you are giving to them, but they are not so very simple in all the ways. To understand at a basic level, these are the societies that are at the early levels of culture. Did I was saying something. Paper 3, chapter 3, paper 2. There is one term you can notice there called jajmani or jajmani, whatever. Proper nouns can be spelled in whatever way. This, of course, we are going to read in paper 2 Indian social system, but I am using that word because at many places I will be using the term called jajmani relations. What we mean by this is the relations that are there between families and culture groups across time and space. Jajmani are more or less permanent relations that you establish between culture groups that are established between families. I repeat what I said. Jajmani relations meaning these are more or less permanent relations that exist between caste groups, between culture groups, between families. When I am saying that in the Kula tradition, when an islander goes to another island, people know whom to contact. Because they have been maintaining relations for a long time, for generations. It's as simple as when you go to a temple town. You are not going on a big hunt for which priest I should go to or which barber I should go to. Already your family for generations had been taking services from one particular priest or one particular service provider. So the moment you land there, you directly go him, or maybe he is already informed, he would come and receive, he would do all the kinds of pujas that are required for you. This is a jajmani relation. Did you understand? It's as simple as right from your great-grandfather's time, the same Dhobi family is serving you. When the grandfather died of the Dhobi, his son and his son and his son, that is continuing, that is jajmani relation. Like how after me, my son, after you, your children. They are preparing for UPSC, he is teaching anthropology. This is interfamilial, intercaste, intergenerational, more or less permanent relationship. Did you understand? When I am using these terms across the papers, what my expectation is, you would be using such kind of terms from paper 1 and paper 2, exchanging, using, so that a comprehensive picture comes up. This is in a way experimental. So what they used to do was travel from one island to the other, and there are several things that go on. When people go there, there is so much that happens. There are the elements of hospitality. There is so it's a fun-filled event. If people from one island, you don't worry writing. Things will come in a much more detail to you later. Those are the 3 words that I really like: hospitality, help, and assistance. So it's not like when a guest comes, you have eyebrows raised in a question mark. Kya laaye ho, kab jaoge, kind of a thing. It's not that way. The events are fun-filled. They serve the best of the dishes, and because they know that they will have to go someday, very soon. They are not going to keep the things permanently with them. This is the kind of reciprocity on which things operate. Not everything can be exchanged with money. Certain things have to be in the form of services, certain things in the form of goods. Of course, money operates in most of the ways, including marriage. Marriage has a lot of money that is involved. But these people are busy exchanging. He was studying economics of various kinds, economic exchanges of various kinds. I'll show you something very interesting. There is this other practice in Trobriand Islands termed as Yurigubu. Read that, don't bother writing. brother gifting 3/4 of his annual earnings to his sister's husband, along with certain kula items. Those are the names used for the kula items. Had it been a modern society, would you do that? 3/4 of your earning. తలగా కట్నం ఇవ్వడానికే ఏడుస్తున్నావు. కట్నం ఇవ్వాలి కదా. Dowry is a primordial responsibility of a brother. You will have to do everything, whatever jugaad possible, so that you give a decent amount of dowry in your sister's marriage. This is a lifetime thing. So every brother would be praying that I shouldn't have a sister. And he will also be praying that my wife would have umpteen number of brothers. Even if she is the lone sister there, because there is a tradition, you need not have to do any kind of economic activity. Your wife's brothers would do the needful for you. This is something that cannot be explained in the modern economics. He was trying to see several such kinds of economic practices. Interestingly, in the contemporary world, some of the islands there, in the contemporary world today, in the 21st century, some of the islands there are involved in modern trading activities, but because they are very much aware of those trading routes, the trade goes on along the same lines. They are familiar with the seasons, when to move. With all the kind of traditional knowledge, modern businesses are flourishing in that particular region. So economics was one where Malinowski said that you cannot simply operate, you cannot simply understand the economics with the modern principles. Just have a look at this. There is one definition that he is giving. The second one, don't bother about the rest of the ones. I am reading out for the people who are there at the last. Culture comprises of inherited artifacts, goods, etc., etc. In several of the contributions, his definition of culture is one more. We already know one definition given by Taylor long time back. For Taylor, culture is something that is learned as a member of that society. Everything that is there in the culture, you learn as a member of that society. But for this man, culture is something that is inherited. And you inherit artifacts, goods, technical processes, ideas, values. But in his descriptions, mostly he is looking at the material aspects that are inherited. There is less importance given in his definition to the non-material elements, whereas Taylor's definition is mostly filled with the non-material elements. Interestingly, people who challenge classical evolutionism, they also readily accept Taylor's definition of culture. People who support Malinowski, they say that this may be used to substantiate, to add strength to the definition of Taylor. Culture may be both inherited and learned. So currently, if you want to use both of them, culture is a combination of what you have learned, what you have inherited from inside, and what you are learning and getting it from outside. One very interesting statement Malinowski makes: there is no virgin culture in the society now, in the world now. There is no culture that is not contacted by others, no culture that is perfectly in isolation. It is only that the level of isolation may be different. But some kind of contact or the other definitely occurs. Some of them are totally affected by the outsider. But there's only difference in the degrees. Or it is only a matter of time that all the so-called simple societies would be in contact with the modern world. Modern society is complex not simply because of the technology, the complexity that emerged in the relationships. Forget about people far off from you, your own family, it is difficult to understand each other. The expectation is that the other fellow understands you, and you are not putting effort to understand the other fellow. This is all the blame game that goes on. Whether it is at the individual level, or at a cultural level, or at a massive international level. But then this is the other contribution by him, that is definition of culture. I'll take you somewhere else. I would want to mention, before going into several detailed, complex things, there's very interesting one there. We will, in the future couple of classes, will be writing, because this is one that I am expecting this year, Malinowski's presentation of religion and magic. Malinowski's presentation of religion and magic. Earlier, questions like functionalist view of religion and magic, religion was coming, people were writing functionalism, etc. But specifically what I am looking for is Malinowski's views and writings on religion and magic. He is a functionalist. When I say that he is a functionalist, he is that thinker who sees utility in all the cultural elements. We came across this in the concept of survival also. When somebody said that survival is the thing that is not of any use in the contemporary times, but it was useful earlier, Malinowski would say that no, if it is not having a function, it will not survive. Everything in culture has a function to perform. Everything in society has a function to perform. He doesn't see a negative element as a negative one. That is seen as a criticism there. Comically put, people also said that Malinowski would see a function in a robber, in a rapist, in a murderer. So maybe back home you can sit and think, what could be a function of a rapist? Or what could be a function of a murderer? Maybe he is doing his job by reducing the number of people on the earth. Just imagine the judiciary sees a function in a rapist, function in a murder. How the judicial system would deal with the whole thing. It is not that Malinowski is seeing a function in them, but it is generally comically put when he said that every cultural element has a function to perform, including religion. For a question like why religion, what is religion? He had defined, Taylor had defined religion, right? What is religion? Belief in supernatural. And what is God? Take time. What is God? How do you define God? Sir? Don't say God is supernatural, something else. How do you define God? Not everybody. Source of? According to him, God is a source of supernatural. Who who is omnipotent and omnipresent, everywhere and everything he can do. What else? Sir? A creator and a destroyer. We are describing an elephant blindfolded. From some places, elephant looks very thin and long if you are holding its tail. Who is God? How do you define God? Take time. We can rely on Him. Truly, you can't rely on anybody else.
An incarnation of the existence.
An incarnation of the belief system people have. Meaning? Sir? A form that humans cannot explain. There is one very interesting definition that I was coming across the other day. God may be defined as the only entity, the existence of Him has no reason from outside. All the other entities have a reason from outside. One of the dimensions that is brought may be that He is the creator of the rest of the things. He is not created by anybody else. I repeat the sentence for you. You may meditate on that sentence to understand what it means. God is the only entity that has the reason for being there from within Himself, whereas all the other things in the universe have a reason external to them. Maybe the writer is trying to communicate to us that everything else may be having a creator outside their own selves. God is the only one that has no external creator. Maybe He is the creator of Himself. So one of the very significant things that I would want to see the student indulging in is the philosophy, something like a metaphysics. The philosophy is something like, who am I? At the end of the day, I want the student here to know what is the philosophical background that you believe in. We are not taking philosophy classes. I think one student here was saying the other day, I have tried philosophy, but I came here. I didn't tell him that my final intention is to make students study philosophy. At that time when he came to anthropology, I said, well done. But remember this. He was trying to tell us why religion, what religion, why God. People have different views on religion. If you ask Taylor, he would give us an evolutionary theory. This man would give us a functional theory. Now we are not defining God. Now we say, why religion? We are not defining what is religion. Taylor was defining what is religion. But this man is saying, why religion? Because for every culture trait, there is a function. What is the function of a father? What's the function of a father? Rearing of the child. Success is a relative word.
Providing for the family.
Providing for the family. Rearing of the children. Taking care of the family. Being available when the child needs you. How different is the role of the mother then? What is the function of a mother? Function of a teacher, function of a student, function of an economic organization, similarly function of religion. He gives an interesting thing there. Religion explains the unexplainable. Religion, I am giving the view of Malinowski. These are not my views. Religion explains the unexplainable. That is the functional school of Malinowski. Somewhere he is influenced by Fraser's idea. Religion explains what can be otherwise unexplainable. Nobody else is able to explain. Religion is explained. You are born in this janma in a particular lowly caste. Nobody explains why you are born in that lowly caste. Religion alone can explain, because your previous janma was filled with so many kukarmas, that in this janma you are born in that caste. Maybe you are born as a beggar in this janma because of your deeds of the previous janma. In this janma you beg properly. You fulfill your duties as a beggar. Next janma will be a better one for you. This Punarjanma philosophy in Hindu, that actually relieves us of so much of stress in life. It gives us so many answers. Of course, the entire Hindu philosophy is still there to be studied in our future classes, but here, as the question had come, many questions for which there is no answer. How many times we say to ourselves, why me, God? Why me? Whenever there is a problem that you cannot handle, why me? God says, I am not responsible. You are responsible. It is all your karmas in the previous janma. Why UPSC? Why me? Just imagine such a peace you get. I'll narrate this story for you. Once again, Swami Vivekananda. A very popular story of him. Comparison of Indian beggars with the American beggars. He wrote that the Indian beggars are gods. Out there the beggars are demons and devils. There, if you are entering the regions inhabited by the beggars, you would not come out in a single piece. Because they believe that they are poor and you are rich because of you looting them. In India, beggars are gods. Not simply that they bless you. I'm not speaking of the beggar mafia that is rampantly existing now and things like that. When Vivekananda is giving a statement, that is an ethnographic statement. Don't try comparing beggars then and beggars now. Or the American society then and American society now. Things change so very swiftly. According to him, Indian beggars have no complaints. I am a beggar because of my previous janma. I do everything possible, beg well in this janma. Next janma will be a fruitful one. Hindu Punarjanma philosophy actually helps us find answers. I am studying so much. I am doing everything possible. All the techniques, all the tips that are given by the teachers. I am not able to clear. That fellow, he is new to the field. I am a veteran. He is new to the field. He has just come out of the college. I have given him the notes. He had got the top rank. He is very lucky. I am not. All Punarjanma thing. You may quickly conclude. That doesn't mean that I need not have to do anything now. Because whatever I am going to get is already decided in the previous Janma. The philosophy says, no, what you are doing now is for your future. Also for the present Janma, but also for the future. If you are not doing now, you will not reap your fruit. It is like, soil and the seed. Your previous Janma is something like a soil, and seeds are what you are sowing now. Beautiful philosophy, whether you accept, whether you don't accept, that's another thing. But then interesting things are presented in Hinduism that are copied by several other faiths later. This man comes explaining unexplainable. God knows. So many times we say God knows. When we are using God there, that is the functionality of God. Why God? He explained the unexplainable. Even after explaining, he is not explaining anything. That's a different story. Influenced by Fraser's writings, he studied the magico-religious rituals in the Trobriand Islanders. Black magic, white magic, etc. When I have written there, psychological element involved, religion is both functional and psychological. Religion is both functional and psychological. I hope you are fine in the class. I hope you are fine in the class. You should be fine in the class. There is no other choice. We are talking about Malinowski's ideas of religion. He looks at religion from functional and psychological perspective. Those of you who are very much used to go to the temples and gods on a regular basis, every Saturday, every Monday, every Friday, every Sunday, in between 1 or 2 weeks, somehow you couldn't make it. You start feeling very low. Whatever something wrong that is going on, small things also, you start seeing in a magnified way. I didn't go to him. I was not praying. I was not offering. I was not breaking coconut. Now you say to the God, God, I will give last week's coconut also. You give peace to me. Many times we go to them for a psychological satisfaction. We hear people saying this, not simply darshanam, puja, elaborate pujas, elaborate rituals. The length of the ritual is coterminous with the kind of peace that you are getting. I am not saying, he is saying. He is looking at the Trobriand Islanders. When you say islanders, they are fishing people. You have already seen their canoes. Canoes are there specific to the purpose. If at all they are going on a coolaring, the canoe is of a different kind. If it is for fishing, it's of a different kind. Functionality is exhibited in the kind of, the intricate designing that they make. Now he was comparing the rituals that are involved in different kinds of fishing expeditions. If the fishing is only coastal fishing, there is a less risk involved. There is a less risk involved. So the magico-religious ceremonies there are smaller, shorter. They are not complicated. But suppose if somebody is going for high sea fishing, very difficult. There is a threat of life involved. You don't know whether you would come back or not. Those involve elaborate rituals. So based on the kind of return that you are expecting, based on the kind of assistance that from the God you are expecting, the complicated rituals are there. As simple as, based on the kind of exam that you want to pass. A tougher exam, you have tougher ritual. A smaller exam, smaller ritual. Weekend test you want to do well, one Saturday's upavas will be sufficient. But suppose it is UPSC you want to pass, the year-long Saturday upavas. 30-day, 40-day upvas. Because you feel that God will answer you. Sir, establishing familiarity between you and the God is very much important. I'm giving a very valuable statement there. Are you feeling hungry? Can't help it. I was saying this. Establishing familiarity between you and the God is very important to get the result, whatever may be the result. When I'm saying establishing familiarity, sir, you are going to the high seas for fishing. Suddenly, if you start calling him, he won't recognize you. You will have to already introduce to the God. Introduce yourself to the God on a regular basis. You keep visiting. He knows you. I am saying this in the context of write-ups that you give to me. I recognize only those students who constantly write. If you haven't written anything, I don't know you. So after finishing your batch, you come to me, I was so and so, I don't know. Because you haven't written anything to me. Constantly you should be submitting your applications to the gods. Repeatedly, maybe for the same thing, year after year. Is saal to kara de, is saal to kara de. So one fine day you'll write, this is the last year, is saal to kara de. Then you'll say, okay, he is coming every year to me. Give him. Familiarity is very much important. All this what I am saying, this is not my philosophy. This is the philosophy which Malinowski had given from what he had seen in Trobriand. Continuing with what Fraser had done, he examined the white and black magic and the intricate details he tried to write in his ethnograph. That's where he was saying, these are not really so very simple as people said so. There is so much of complexity therein. In fact, in the modern world, economics is very simple. Paisa phek, tamasha dekh. You just give money, everything is possible. But there it is not that way. Money alone is not sufficient. Sir, money alone is not sufficient. Day in and day out you are slogging, saying that it is for the family, not giving time to your wife, to your own wife and to your own children, to your own parents. Not doing enough for your own parents and trying to give charity to the old age home, not working. What is there in your vicinity, your primary responsibility, you'll have to do that over and above that. I don't know, when was the last time when we had sat with our mother and asked, not with her father, with our mother, and we had asked, what is it that you actually like? What is it that you actually want? Many times we take her for granted. I am not a feminist. I have all love for my male friends. But I don't know, when was the last time? She always cooks for you what you are fond of. She always does things for you what you are fond of. When was the last time that she had done or you had done anything that, maybe for that we have the Mother's Day. At least on that day. I was seeing that cartoon the other day, last Mother's Day. You wanted to give her rest for one day, so you had to employ a whole lot of battalion to do things for you on that day. A continuous machine that goes on working one after the other tasks. When was the last time that she had taken a leave? I don't know. My intention was not here to market mother. But the functional analysis, that was what he was doing, psychological element there. So we will be writing a lot of other things. Go back to that chart that you have written in the beginning. One other area I will be finishing, a small one, then in tomorrow's class we will be writing. There is a small other area, sir, called kinship. Concept of kinship. You already know by now several people who had studied kinship, most importantly Morgan, when he was trying to give a sequence of emergence of kinship terminology systems. we see that Malinowski's contribution to the study of kinship is not so very grand. But he also tried to incorporate that in his writings. Primarily, if you are not interested in something, you don't do it with earnestness, or you don't give it so much of a detail there. First of all, he didn't like the kinship at all. For him, kinship terminologies are nothing more important than mere algebraic terms. If you are calling somebody X, it's okay. X or Y or Z doesn't matter. Unless otherwise, X is doing what one has to do. If you are calling somebody a father, somebody a mother, somebody a brother or wife or husband, doesn't matter. Whatever the duties of a husband that is there, you will have to do. What is the duty of a husband? That's where, I actually come to this term that Manusmriti had used, Purusha Dharma. What is the dharma of a Purusha? What is the dharma of a Purusha? నాకు సినిమాలు అంటే చాలా ఇష్టం అమ్మా, చాలా అసలు చచ్చిపోతాం అనమాట. What is the dharma of a Purusha? Occupation, earning. Purusha's basic dharma is earning. Just imagine a house husband. Housewife, you don't question. What do you do? I am a homemaker. Adi fashionable ga ippudu cheptuna. Housewife. Whether you make or break house, that's a different thing. A housewife. Somebody chooses to be a house husband. Subjective judgment. He wants to be a house husband. Anyway, she is earning, no? She is already into job software. 2 lakh per month. What will we do with 2 lakhs? You think that more additional income is not really necessary? But basically, when you are getting happy with her 2 lakhs, question comes, what are you? I'm leaving you there. Keep thinking about what are you. Tomorrow, the moment we come, we will start writing. I see that you're getting tired, So we will have to be writing the first about 1.5 hours, later 1.5 we will be talking. Have a good time. Not to forget mentioning the videos there. This is your 10th class. 9th class, I'm so sorry. 9th class. Sir, we have discussed 2 important terms. Sorry. We have discussed 2 important terms, ethnicity, cultural relativism. Ethnicity, cultural relativism. Topic we introduced was Malinowski. Videos you need to watch: Tales from the Jungle, Malinowski, in that series 1, 2, 4 and 5. Tales from the Jungle, Malinowski, those are BBC's documentaries. 1, 2, 4 and 5. Have a great time.
In 1910, when Malinowski began to study anthropology, it was the Australian Aborigines that were under particular scrutiny. Reports told of promiscuity and multiple sexual partners. It was the Aborigines' apparent lack of any family structure that confirmed their place at the base of social evolution. But Malinowski wasn't impressed with this conclusion.
Everyone acquainted with ethnographic information in general, and that of Australia and its Aborigines in particular, knows how ambiguous and confused it is on nearly every point.
Keen to get ahead in his new line of work, Malinowski took a thorough look at all the data on Aboriginal family life.
He looks at all this material, at the Australian material. He looks at censuses. He looks at photographs. He looks at descriptions of who are interacting with whom in the villages.
And his research led him to a radically different conclusion.
He says, well, look, whatever these people are telling you, it's quite clear that they are living in something very much like what we would call families. You have a man with one or two, sometimes three women whom he's living with on a long-term basis, over whom he has more or less exclusive rights of various kinds, including sexual rights. Their children are very close to him. They live together in one or two adjoining huts. They cook together, they eat together. Well, that's a family. Malinowski said, it looks like a family, it talks like it's a family, even if it doesn't call itself a family.
This initial research confirmed his view that anthropology was riddled with prejudices and lacked rigor. Malinowski was one of those who concluded that anthropology needed a strong dose of scientific discipline. And with a degree in maths and physics, he had exactly the right credentials.
The work of scientifically trained observers, like myself, once seriously applied to anthropology, will yield results of surpassing value. So far, it has been done solely by amateurs, and therefore done, on the whole, indifferently.
Not only was Malinowski a scientist, but his peculiarly obsessive personality was ideally suited to the task ahead. Malinowski's life was one long struggle for personal perfection, both mentally and physically.
Particularly from reading the diaries, I thought that he had this really introspective side where he was, his diary, I think he saw it as a tool.
He was a perfectionist for himself.
You know,
Yes.
Yeah.
He wished to make his life perfect if he could.
He meticulously scrutinized every aspect of himself.
With me, the extremism in self-analysis is pathological, and it leads towards a morbid exaggeration.
First, there was his alarmist obsession with health.
He's such a hypochondriac. Pill bottles everywhere. Do you think that comes from being sick as a child?
I think he was a born hypochondriac, perhaps is the wrong word, but it's possible. You know, he's obviously a sensitive being, you know. but I...
Putting it mildly.
Putting it mildly.
His nervous disposition was so extreme that Malinowski relied on the somewhat dubious panacea of the time, regular injections of arsenic. There were also the intricacies of Malinowski's complex mind.
There is a craving in me for the sensational, for the abnormal. I suspect ill of others and imagine dreadful possibilities.
He says on one occasion in his diary is, I have a fear of pointed objects. Stickophobia, I call it. And fur, he didn't like touching fur coats or anything like that. Velvet and anything slippery, mud. Several times a day he'd rub his hands with hot water and soap.
In short, I suffer from a mania of paranoia and persecution. And all this was hand in hand with my poor health and my bad nerves. Though perhaps the one feeds upon the other.
Malinowski's obsessive analysis of himself, combined with his scientific mind, would make him the man that could change anthropology. By 1914, the more forward-thinking of the profession were keen on their students taking the equivalent of an anthropological gap year. For Malinowski, this consisted of a grand tour of Australia and its remote territories. Leaving behind his beloved mother, he set off on a busy schedule with many stop-offs. After 3 months, Malinowski reached Papua New Guinea. Even today, it is a wild-looking land of jungle, swamp, and mysterious cultures.
Popular imagination, I suppose Papua was a dark, cannibal-ridden, a savage place. I mean, a real redoubt of savages. The government was always saying how difficult it was, to pacify this place. Travel writers were reporting on it as being a rather malaria-ridden, unhealthy place for Europeans, but fascinating with these colourful customs and colourful natives.
This dark place was the essence of all things primitive and a dream come true for the young anthropologist. But being a sickly, self-obsessed hypochondriac, Papua New Guinea was also Malinowski's own private hell.
He knew he was entering into a dangerous place. What worried him, I think, more than anything else, was the heat.
I have a strong fear of the tropics, an abhorrence of heat, sultriness. Overtaxed heart, nervousness. There is a taste in my mouth and a pain behind my eyes. I think I may vomit. If I do, I'm sure it is tuberculosis. Now, perhaps the lack of exercise is at the root of this condition. Or the tinned food. I must get more exercise, especially in the morning and in the evening. Arsenic is indispensable, but I must not exaggerate the quinine. Also a somewhat congested nose and throat. I am beginning to believe the hypothesis that I am about to die.
Despite this inner turmoil, his work of participant observation was about to pay off. 6 months after arriving, Malinowski began to study an ancient tradition that really intrigued him. He noted that every few months, islanders would build fleets of elaborately decorated canoes as part of a tradition known as kula. For kula, they set out on voyages, leaving behind friends and family for months at a time. And kula voyages from neighbouring islands would be awaited with great anticipation.
What you would see over the horizon, these tiny, tiny canoes converging until there might be 60 or 80 or possibly 100. You will suddenly see people on the island start going into the sea to meet these canoes. And as the canoes come nearer, the people going into the sea will recognize individuals on the canoes.
Kula visitors were treated to great feasts, attracting hundreds of locals to these celebrations. Particularly striking were the risks the islanders were prepared to take for Kula, as Malinowski himself discovered late one night sailing between islands.
We passed very close by a coral island, the sea smashing against the rocks. The islanders were all shouting, trying to control the craft. I was terrified. I started to think of Elsie, sleeping peacefully, and that I might never see her again. Once, the crews of a whole fleet of Trobriand canoes were captured, killed, and eaten by the inhabitants of unknown villages. And let's not forget the perils of simply sailing these seas. The reefs, sandbanks, and coral rocks waiting to smash the fragile canoes. The horror of it. All in the pursuit of Kula.
These islanders, it seemed, risked everything for Kula. And strangest of all, the reward for these perilous journeys was the exchange of flimsy shell trinkets. Kula was time-consuming and dangerous, all for something that seemed apparently pointless. Malinowski made it his goal to discover what it was about Kula that was worth risking your life for. Over the following months, he explored Kula from every angle. He questioned the locals, watched the rituals, and tried to make sense of it all. Gradually, the secrets of Kula began to unfold.
There is such nonchalance in the men arriving for Kula, and nonchalance in the old men receiving them. They come, they sit on the canoe, they chatter and haggle, give in. I eat my rice and kippers and read my Kipling. We talk some more, and gradually I manage to drag out the information I'm after.
The information that he dragged out of the locals revealed a complex and sophisticated ritual. First, there were the people who took part.
Only important men could actually afford to go on a Kula expedition, partly because this meant commissioning a canoe, so it meant some sort of outlay.
Malinowski soon discovered that Kula was almost exclusive to the tribal chiefs and men of rank. These VIPs were connected by Kula to a social network that reached far beyond the Trobriand Islands. And at the heart of Kula were the shell trinkets.
In order to establish relationships with other people, you have to establish relationships with something. And these valuables are the means through which you establish relationships. And this means that people go on large expeditions to go and fetch valuables from elsewhere. They receive people who bring valuables to them. And the result is, if you link up all these relationships, suddenly you find you're in a huge chain of relationships. And this chain of relationships actually spreads across a large island area.
Malinowski uncovered a complex network of Kula exchange, covering 12 island groups spanning 200 miles of ocean. He also discovered why the shell necklaces and bracelets were so highly prized. Each one had a value that came from its unique history as it passed from person to person and from island to island. The value of each object lay in the renown of its former owners.
This is a history of relationships, and what he wants to know is who has had this before, and to whom he's going to, and when he passes it on, his own name will, in a sense, be part of the history of the item.
So these weren't simply shell trinkets. Each chain of shells was a potent symbol of power and prestige. Malinowski's participant observation had revealed that, far from being pointless, Kula played a vital role in Trobriand society, reinforcing the status of the rich and famous.
This is quite a ranked society, and poorer people simply didn't enter into the Kula exchanges. So this was renown and prestige that were there for those who already had renown and prestige. I mean, it sounds familiar, yeah.
And like a trophy won in battle, owning a piece of Kula made you a hero. Living with the natives for 2 years had paid off. Malinowski had revealed that an apparently meaningless native custom was, in reality, significant and crucial to Trobriand society. But his discovery came at some personal cost. On the 11th of June, 1918, after 4 years away from home, Malinowski received bad news. His beloved mother had died.
I do not know how I shall live through the immediate future. My life has changed completely. I am cut adrift. The link between my past and my present is broken. My life will be forever incomplete.
And he stopped writing his diary. He went crying into the bushes. This was a sort of heart of darkness for him.
I am alone. My heart is pierced with grief now that Mother has gone. Everything is now permeated with her. I know I have a void, a black abyss in my soul. All I desire is to die, to go to Mother, to join her in nothingness.
Deliverance came in November 1918. The war was over. Malinowski could at last return to Europe. In 1922, Malinowski published his fieldwork, Argonauts of the Western Pacific. His detailed descriptions revealed a fresh perspective of the natives.
These messages, they might look very different, they might live in a better climate, they might have more interesting sex lives, but they're very like you and me.
Into his world, dominated by class, imperialism, and crude racial stereotypes, Malinowski introduced the radical idea that these savages were, in fact, sophisticated and rational human beings.
The islanders are just like us. Conniving, manipulative, industrious, like any Viennese businessman. And the constitution of the tribe is subject to a strict code of behavior and social niceties, in comparison with which life at the court of Versailles would seem free and easy.
Malinowski's giving you a real, breathing, talking, plausible human being in place of this old stereotype savage who's just the opposite of what you are. And this plausible human being that Malinowski is giving you is not somebody you admire particularly necessarily, I think, any more than you admire your next-door neighbor, but you recognize him. You say, aha, yeah, I can see what he's up to. I can understand it. It makes sense to me, because he's rather like me in many ways.
Not only were Trobrianders just like us, but behind the apparent strange native customs, their societies were every bit as complex as our own.
When I returned to Europe, I visited Edinburgh Castle and was shown the crown jewels. The curator told stories about how they'd been worn by this or that king on such and such an occasion. And as I was looking at them and thinking how intrinsically tawdry they were, I had the feeling something similar had been told me of late. And suddenly, there rose before my eyes the image of a native village on coral soil, and of a brown, naked man showing me long red strings and worn-out objects, greasy to the touch. And these Trobriand Vegua valuables are cherished and revered in exactly the same way as those crown jewels, purely for the historical sentiment that surrounds them.
And Malinowski went further. Just as cooler shells were equivalent to our crown jewels, acquiring them was equal to our heroic sporting victories. And he believed these cultural similarities applied right across the globe. Shamanism and magic were similar to our grand religions. Maori tattoos were like medals of achievement.
Malinowski was very clever because what he did in a way was he civilized the savage and savaged the civilized. He showed that they weren't irrational, that they just had different cultural rules to ours.
To many, what Malinowski was proposing was nothing short of revolutionary. Humanity was the same the world over. And he thought he could reveal why with a big new idea in anthropology. Malinowski believed that he'd discovered the engine that drove all human cultures, and that engine could be found right at the heart of all of us.
What is the deepest essence of my investigations? The discovery of the native's passions, his motives, his aims, his essential way of thinking. And it is at this point that I am confronted with my own problems. My self-analysis leads me to ask, what is essential in me?
He said that everybody, everywhere, is driven by the same passions. Hunger, fear, vanity, sex. What he began to propose was that all human cultures had a purpose. Every custom could be interpreted as serving a function in society, and that rituals have evolved to satisfy our basic needs. He called his theory functionalism. It could be applied to all societies, however sophisticated or apparently primitive. And when Malinowski's functionalism was applied to our own society, it promised a whole new way of seeing our familiar world. Today, Sophie is 4 years old. She's having a birthday party.
And I said, hello, Mr. Elephant.
At first sight, a toddler's birthday party is just about the toddlers. It's all of them having fun, and it's about gift giving.
In fact, there is a deeper social function to Sophie's party.
Look, you've got some sunglasses.
In fact, of course, if you look at it, there's a lot more going on. There's who's really inviting whom. And there are very clear decisions as to who is being invited on what basis. There's a sense of social obligation. If you have a group of mothers who've been invited to a toddler's party, well, they should feel obliged to invite that toddler back to theirs. Malinowski is pointing out how culturally constituted are so many of the activities and the ways in which we live, which we would otherwise think are just purely natural. It's the way we do things.
By unravelling different cultures, Malinowski had made us reflect more objectively upon ourselves and our own society.
Are we so superior? Are we so different? Don't we just have a large number of cultural rules by which we order our society? It's just that we start off from different premises.
By 1927, only 9 years after leaving the Trobrians, the charismatic young professor was leading his own department at LSE. Brilliant, autocratic and temperamental, Malinowski had a dramatic impact on all those who came under his spell.
People I knew who were his students, all the men, hated him, argued with him, but were obsessed by him. And the women loved him, without exception. All his women students adored him.
He used his influence to revolutionize anthropology.
From now on, Malinowski introduced the new apprenticeship in anthropology. You couldn't be an anthropologist in Britain after Malinowski without going and doing a year or 2 years as a participant observer, learning the language in some pretty exotic part of the world. It became the initiation ceremony without which you were never going to be a professional.
And a whole generation of his disciples spread out across the world, promoting this new anthropology. With his success, Malinowski had finally finished off Victorian anthropology.
After Malinowski, there was no more of the old armchair anthropology in British anthropology. It really was like turning a switch. That was the end of it in Britain.